Aloha and welcome to our 2022 Housing Day event hosted by Senator Stanley Chang and Representative Nadine Nakamura. Thank you all for being here. For today's event, we have advocates, representatives in agencies and developers joining us to share their perspectives on Hawaii's housing shortage crisis. We have a packed program for this 1-hour event. I've added the link to the program in the chat. I will link it again for those that have come a little bit later for you to follow. And without further ado, let's get started. With opening remarks, it is my pleasure to introduce to you Senator Stanley Chang, Chair of the Hawaii State Senate Housing Committee.
Thank you so much, Lynn. Let me first begin by thanking a number of people without whose hard work today would not be possible. First of all, Representative Nadine Nakamura, Chair of the Housing Committee in the House of Representatives, for jointly presenting this event with us. Several folks in our office, including Lynn, Alex, Chelsea, and Ian, and the Senate Communications Office for their heavy lifting. All of our speakers for their hard work over many years on housing. And finally, all of you for tuning in and choosing to be part of the solution to this existential threat. And let me repeat that this is an existential threat. Hawaii's housing shortage is the most severe in the nation. Housing prices have continued to go up even as we've faced the worst economic crisis in generations and the highest unemployment rate in the United States earlier in the pandemic. The median price of a single family home in 3 of the 4 counties, including Oahu, is now over $1 million. And the most visible impact of this shortage is, of course, our homelessness crisis. We picked today, February 22nd, not because it's 2/2/2/2 day, but because it is the 53rd day of the year. And as the flyer for this event states, the average life expectancy for a houseless person in Hawaii is just 53 years old, as compared to the average life expectancy statewide of 80.9 years. Hawaii does have the second highest rate of homelessness of any state. And to me, that's actually just the tip of the iceberg, because the rest of the iceberg is all of the local people that we don't see here in Hawaii because they have left. We've lost 30,000 residents over the last 5 straight years of population decline, a trend that is accelerating. The labor force has shrunk by 25,700 workers, in part due to the population exodus since the beginning of the pandemic. Perhaps most chillingly, over half of all Native Hawaiians now live outside of Hawaii. And in fact, there are now more Hawaii-born college graduates on the mainland than there are here in Hawaii. In other countries, people recognize what a huge problem this population decline is. And I'll just highlight one example that I learned about recently. Russia is so concerned about their population decline that they actually now have a national day of conception on September 12th to try to stimulate population growth in that country. As always, this crisis has fallen inequitably on our population. And one example that I always talk about is my father, who was an immigrant from China, came here with nothing. He was a UH professor, so he had 1 salary, a state employee with 1 salary. He was able to buy this house that I live in today in 1983 as a state employee with 1 salary to put my brother and me through private school. I also went to private college and private graduate school. He was then able to buy investment property and then retire comfortably. Today, I, as a state employee with 1 salary of about $62,000, it would take 40 years of my entire salary to buy the same house that my father bought in 1983. The difference is that we were literally building 10 times the amount of housing per year in the mid-1970s as we are today. And as we can see, the burden of this housing production shortfall has fallen disproportionately on our young people and our working population. It's also fallen with great disparities ethnically. There's some good news. The Okinawan homeownership rate in this state is 77.3%, significantly higher than the statewide average and the national average. The Japanese homeownership rate is 73.6%. Those are bright spots. But there are also some pretty dark spots as well. The Native Hawaiian homeownership rate is just 55.7%. The African American homeownership rate is only 20.8%. And the Marshallese homeownership rate is just 7.7%. That is 90% lower, or that is, I should say, the Okinawan homeownership rate is 10 times that of the Marshallese homeownership rate. The good news is that our crisis is entirely self-inflicted. Our economy is still growing. Our young people still deeply desire to make their lives here. I have to imagine that at least some of the diaspora of the Native Hawaiian community wants to return to the origin land of their ancestors. And so we have a number of great speakers today who are going to be able to present on their perspectives, not just on the shortage, but also their proposed solutions and how we can actually change this situation. So with that, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you again for participating today, and I'll hand it back to you, Lynn.
My apologies, everyone. Just giving some tech help to one of our speakers. So moving on, thank you, Senator Chang, for your opening remarks. Moving on, we have Jill Wright, Community Relations Director from the Institute of Human Services. Jill, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Lynn, and thank you, Senator Chang, for the introduction and setting us up today, and for your tireless work to address this, as you said, existential crisis that we have, that has been looming for a long time and growing and impacting all of us and our work and our communities. So as you mentioned, I'm with IHS, Institute for Human Services, and most of you probably know we are the state's largest homeless service provider. You likely also know what Senator Chang mentioned, which is that Hawaii, unfortunately, holds the dubious distinction of having the second highest rate of homelessness per capita in all of the US. And we held the first place spot for a while, but we were eclipsed by New York, maybe just a couple of years ago. About 10,000 of our residents per year experience homelessness. And on any given night, that's about 6,500 people that are without a home. So, I talk a lot about the homelessness you see versus the homelessness that you don't see. And if you'd humor me just for a second and kind of close your eyes and think about homelessness and think about the people in our community that are homeless, what I'm guessing you're thinking about, right, is the folks that you see in the pavilions in Waikiki, maybe aggressively panhandling. You're thinking about the folks that you see on the street of Chinatown that likely, struggle from mental illness or substance abuse. You may think about the encampments on the streets, on River Street and so forth. And that is what I kind of talk about broadly as the homelessness you see, but there's a lot of homelessness that you don't see too. That we see here at IHS. And there's 3,500 kids in the Hawaii DOE that are living in unstable housing. And you think about the impact that that has on their educational growth, on their emotional growth, on being able to study in a quiet place and have reliable internet and be able to form social bonds if they're moving a lot, going to different schools, can't bring somebody over at the end of the day. The homelessness you don't see also includes people like, we have a lot of kapuna, a growing number as our baby boomers are aging. We have people who are in our shelter. 20% of the folks who sought shelter from IHS last year were over the age of 60. And you heard Senator Chang say the average age life expectancy of a homeless individual is 53. So when you are 60 and you are homeless, you are likely coming to us with a lot of medical complications, psychological complications. So it is very difficult to help people in the long term when they don't have prospects for working. They're on a fixed income, most likely. So these are people that we see in our shelters all the time. We see families with infants coming to us straight from the hospital. We get calls from Queens all the time. We have a family that just had a baby. They've been living in their car. Can they come stay with you? So all of these things you don't see very often, when you're walking down the street, but they are very present in our community. And when we work with a homeless individual, if you have ever worked in homelessness, you know that the path out of homelessness is very rarely straight, right? There's all these different things that people need. Some people need help securing a birth certificate that they lost somewhere along the way. And, to move ahead in life, you got to have an ID, and you can't get an ID until you have a birth certificate and a social security card. And all of these things, take time. So it's not just the mental health and the physical health and the substance abuse and the getting better jobs, although those are all part of the equation. But there are a lot of things and setbacks along the way to getting people to overcome their homeless situation. But at the end of the road, no matter all the different paths that we take to get people to overcome their homeless situation, at the end of the road, there has to be a place for them to live. And if there is nowhere for them to go and nowhere that they can afford to go, then the cycle repeats itself. If they're paying, going somewhere where they're going to have to pay 50% of their income to live or more, that cycle is just going to repeat itself. And maybe they'll stay housed for 6 months or a year. But if they are paying that much of their income to live here, guess what? They're then one car payment, one, broken down car or a missed paycheck or illness, medical bill away from, being back in a homeless situation. So, I know we have been talking for a long time about, getting over this affordable housing crisis is going to take time and it's not going to happen overnight. I think we all know that, but we need to act now. We need to explore all of these possibilities available to us. Build new development, yes, absolutely. Redeveloping old structures, absolutely. Cow hallways, yes. Incentives, yes. So all of these things, are going to be part of the constellation of things that we need to do to help avert this homeless crisis. And, we can definitely do our part as service providers, and we do, and we will continue to do so. But unless there is a place to put people and that people can affordably live, we are not going to see an end to this homeless crisis anytime soon. So thank you again for inviting us here today. I'm excited to hear the panel of speakers about some of the solutions that lie ahead. So thanks again.
Thank you, Jill. We really appreciate your input. Thanks for being here. Next up, we have Tyler Gomes with the Department of Hawaii Homelands. Tyler works as the deputy to the chairman. Tyler, thank you for being here with us.
Oha kako. Mahalo nui to Senator Chang and Representative Nakamura and everyone who worked together to put this on. I will be brief today. We're actually in the middle of our monthly Hawaiian Homes Commission meeting. So I think to get right to it, the big question everyone's been asking is, you're the belle of the ball this legislative session, and you folks are potentially looking to receive $600 million. What are you going to do with it? I think the unceremonious answer is that's entirely dependent on our legislature and what version of the bill eventually passes out. And so to better answer the question, I think we can look at what we're already doing and what the need is. Last session, I think we were very effective in communicating the department's financial needs. We estimated we'd need approximately $4.5 to $6 billion just to subsidize the infrastructure alone for every individual on the wait list, assuming no other individuals are added to the wait list. We also estimated that at the current rate of funding that we receive, it would take us approximately 183 years to clear the wait list if nothing changed. I think the department in the last 20 years in particular has done quite a bit to diversify product offerings and the way in which it engages with beneficiaries that shifts the conversation from how many Native Hawaiians are on the wait list to how many Native Hawaiians are you serving. And so that demands that the department looks at the entire spectrum of housing and the entire range of needs for all of our beneficiaries. And I think what becomes really clear is it's obviously not going to be one size fits all. people know that single family homes are sort of the traditional expectation of the Department of Hawaiian Homelands. Our most recent developments in Kapolei, we were doing 5-bedroom, 3 baths for $380,000, which is remarkable considering the median home price. And even then, we have beneficiaries who simply cannot afford that range. On the other end of the spectrum, we have existing buildings on properties that we have acquired in Kalailoa that need to be rehabbed, and we're envisioning a model in which we can provide transitional housing in structures like that. Sanford's on the car, I'll let him talk about, Sanford's on the call, I'll let him talk about it, but we're looking at how we can partner to create rentals in a condominium style of living. Again, not a very traditional approach to Hawaiian Homelands, but necessary nonetheless. And we've even sort of revamped the way we approach our agricultural leases. So we've moved into subsistence agriculture, which calls for smaller lots, greater utilization of the lands we have, less stringent requirements of the beneficiaries in terms of cultivation, which makes it easier for them to engage. So at the end of the day, when people are like, what are you going to do with $600 million? There's a whole bunch of projects that could be funded and will continue to need to be funded in the future. But if you look at the $600 million we received as a part of the Act 14 settlement, we were able to build about 4,000 homes with that $600 million. So another $600 million could be very meaningful. It's obviously not going to cut the wait list in half, but anything we can do to bring that number down and provide housing is incredibly important. And I think to just wrap it up really neatly with the bow, last session we received the historically highest amount of money that the department has ever received from the legislature. This year, if all goes well, we're looking to receive the single greatest amount of money that the legislature has ever committed in a single year to the Department of Hawaiian Homelands. And we're so incredibly appreciative of that. But we think that that should be the catalyst for continuing to provide historic levels of funding to the department in order to ensure that we cut down on the wait list. And the $600 million isn't seen as a magic bullet for a problem that really is not going to be solved by that one infusion alone. So I apologize for my brevity, but all that to say, the department has a number of plans, a number of opportunities that we can put the funding into, and I think it could all be very, very interesting. So thank you for the opportunity to be here with you folks.
Thank you so much, Tyler. We really appreciate it. It was neatly with a bow, all of it. We really appreciate you being here. We'll let you get back to your meeting. Aloha. And next up, we have Hakeem Wansafi from the Hawaii Public Housing Authority. Hakeem serves as the executive director. Hakeem, thank you so much for joining us.
Hello, everyone. Good to see you all. Thank you for giving me this 3 hours to speak about this subject. So I'll just talk slowly, unlike my friend Tyler. Just to put a little bit in context, the Housing Authority, we serve about 45,000 tenants. This is accomplished through 6,270 federal and state public housing units, 3,400 Section 8 vouchers, 214 rent supplement, state rent supplement units, 3,000 performance-based contract condos, and 182 emergency vouchers. But yet, with that many people that we serve, anytime we open the wait list, we're shocked by over 10,000 folks that apply for our housing and assistance in a matter of 2 to 3 days. And with the capital repairs that's needed, over $700 million, we found ourselves trying to find out what is the best way to move forward to make a dent in what's happening in our state. But something I wasn't prepared for was when Senator Chang just said the average life for a homeless person is 53. And when I heard that word 53, it brought me back to when I lost my sister a couple of years ago to cancer at the age of 53. And I guess he put it in perspective for me a little bit more personal, that cancer has stolen my little sister, but yet homelessness and lack of homes are stealing lives for many folks. It's really sad. So we do need a robust commitment of money, resources, not just for the rental housing, but also for home ownerships and services And I think our commitment has to be greater than that of cancer, because while cancer, there is no cure. We already know what the cure is for this homelessness and issues that we are running into. And when you don't have much inventory, like we do when you reach 97% occupancy and the other 3% are being worked on, or middle people are in the middle of moving, the only way for us to move forward from the housing authority's perspective is to build additional housing. And that is why we're teaming up in P3s with other developers. For example, School Street, 800 elderly, 100% affordable for life. Phase 1 will be shoveling ground this year. We need projects like that. There are multiple others, but I know the time is very limited, so I'm probably not going to go over it, the whole thing. But we also try to find what other creative ways that we may have to be able to do our job, because to build housing, you need bond cap, you need a tremendous amount of commitment of money and things like that. We do apply anytime there is a federal grant or federal vouchers. We no matter what, we apply for it, and usually we do get it. We recently get a move to work designation. It was only one available nationwide for large housing authorities, and we applied and got it. That will give us certain flexibilities to be able to serve our folks more expeditiously, to be able to serve more folks as we move forward. But equally as important is to create programs and incentives that will help the community to be housed, and help our landlords to provide the housing that they have and for our folks. Other things is through a RAD and Section 18. Those are financial tools that we're in the process of putting together, and we have completed some of them already. Why don't I just stop that? I know there's a lot of more important speakers after me. Thank you for the time, and let's work together. Aloha.
Thank you so much, Hakeem. The work that you're doing is incredibly important, and we really appreciate you being here. Next up, we have Soon Kim. She works with Faith Action Housing Now as a community organizer. Soon, thank you so much for being with us.
Aloha mai kako. First and foremost, thank you very much for allowing me this opportunity to present today. My name is Soon Kim, and I'm a community organizer with Faith Action for Community Equity. We are a grassroots interfaith 501c3 nonprofit organization that consists of 25 member churches and community organizations. For the past 2 decades, our members have worked together to address the root causes of social justice challenges that are faced by the community. During the past few months, our members have taken to the streets armed with clipboards to survey the community. Our objective is to connect the needs of public transit riders to other community needs, such as affordable housing. I will begin my presentation by defining the term affordable. According to the Hawaii Housing Finance and Development Corporation, an individual or household that earns 140% of the area median income, AMI for short, is eligible for affordable housing. The AMI is the midpoint of a region's income distribution. Now, what is affordable housing? Affordable housing costs, including utilities, should not exceed 30% of an individual or household's income. For example, in Honolulu County, affordable rent and utilities at 140% AMI would cost $2,961 per month for a studio, $3,172 per month for a 1-bedroom unit, or $3,808 a month for a 2-bedroom home. Now that we have a collective understanding of the term affordable, what did our findings from the surveys determine? Based on our findings, affordable isn't really affordable. A little over a third of the people we have surveyed are willing to live in a smaller unit, such as a 1-bedroom or smaller. A third of the respondents cannot afford to pay more than $700 per month for any size home. That amount does include utilities. And only 29% of the respondents reported that their current housing costs are affordable. However, all but one of those respondents currently live with family or in subsidized housing. So in short, affordable, according to the respondents, does not exceed about 60% AMI, which equates to about $1,269 per month or $1,359 per month for a studio or one bedroom, respectively. Consequently, the public has no faith in the term affordable housing due to the fact that the state allows subsidized and incentivized developments to develop up to those higher 140% AMI dollar amounts. As a result, these homes end up costing far more than what people can afford, despite being marketed as affordable. And why did we survey public transit riders? Because the cost of car ownership is high. Therefore, people who earn less are more likely to rely on public transportation as their sole or primary means of conveyance. Affordable transit-oriented housing will provide and improve the quality of life for public transit riders, where one can work less, spend time with family or in the community, and have more time to participate in leisure activities. As we know, leisure activities fuel our economy. Finally, transit-oriented housing is an access need for our kupuna and people with disabilities, and this improvement can be implemented seamlessly without requiring transit riders to change their transportation habits. However, if government subsidies and incentives continue to go towards housing that is priced well above what people can actually afford, then I'm sorry to say, transit-oriented development will not meet the needs of the community. I will conclude my presentation by sharing a piece of written testimony from a community member who is not able to be here this afternoon due to their work obligations. It was my intention to include more voices from the community. However, due to time constraints and challenges with access needs such as technology, especially for our unhoused neighbors who've been displaced daily by the sweeps, I'm afraid I only have this one story to share with you all today. My name is Tercia Ku. I am 23 years old and I was born and raised on Oahu. I was born into a lower class family, and when I was about 8 years old, became homeless with my mom. We were evicted from our apartment and had no familial support, which resulted in my mom and I ending up on the street for about a year. During this time, I was a student at LOI Elementary School. I would go to school in the same clothes I slept in and get made fun of because it was obvious that I was homeless. As a child, being made fun of for my class status contributed to my social anxiety, which stuck with me well into adulthood. While my mom and I were homeless, we slept mostly in Waikiki and Hokoli on park benches and beaches while being subject to harassment. We often woke up to the cops telling us that we had to leave, making us feel like we were eyesores to the tourists. On one occasion, the cops forcibly separated my mom and I, questioned us, and threatened to put me in child protective services rather than trying to help us move into stable housing. There are many people who are on the verge of homelessness because housing is so expensive. It pushes people onto the streets, which continues the cycle of homelessness and incarceration. Housing is a basic right that has been commodified and profit-based, forcing people, especially Native Hawaiians, to move away from their homelands. We need to put serious effort into Housing for All projects instead of weaponizing the police against our houseless neighbors. We need to get to the root causes of these societal issues instead of putting Band-Aids on gun wounds. Thank you. So, who should we prioritize when it comes to affordable housing? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Soon. We appreciate you being here and thank you for the compelling testimony. I know it was difficult because of those sweeps to be able to share what you wanted to. We appreciate the story that you shared. Moving on, we have Stanford Carr, president of Stanford Carr Development.
Aloha, everybody.
Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, and thank you for the invite. Glad to be a part of this. A lot of familiar faces. Peter, haven't seen you in ages. What you been up to? Let me take you guys back. We did a little research. In 1935, Act 190 of the Territory of Hawaii, which created the Hawaii Housing Authority. Think about that. 87 years ago, that recognized the need for affordable housing. In 1970, Act 105 was commissioned studies that pointed out the cost added by government regulations added to the cost of housing and increase the high cost of housing. So here we are, 52 years later, and we still got the same problem. We need to peel back the onion. In 1976, Act 225 was granted to the Hawaii Housing Authority to develop housing projects in collaboration with private developers as well as on its own, and shall be exempt from all statutes, ordinances, charter provisions, and rules of any governmental agency relating to zoning and construction standards for subdivisions, development, and improvement of land, and the construction and sale of homes. This preceded the Act HRS 201-38 that's been a subject of discussion for many years. And I've had many discussions with some of the legislators because there's been some confusion by each of the counties' interpretation of 201-838, which is an affordable housing statute created by the legislature for the development of affordable housing for both rental and for sale. And yes, Soon Kim is correct. Affordable is an abused term because what's affordable to one person may not necessarily be affordable to another. And we need to be building for the entire housing ladder, from the very low, from the homeless to the very low income to low moderate, as well as market. So subsequently, 201H was created by the state legislature, authorizing and giving each of the 4 counties the same powers. And we have used Act HRS 201H for the last 15 years for entitling properties for development of workforce rentals as well as for sale housing. More recently, Kahoma Village in Lahaina, Maui, which was a 203-unit community on Front Street, Lahaina, and Kainui that would actually provide the opportunity for households who worked in Lahaina, Kaanapali, Kapalua to actually purchase a home and live there. But 201H gives the authority and power to both HHFDC and the counties that all affordable housing projects are exempt from all statutes, ordinances, charter provisions, rules of any governmental agency relating to planning, zoning, construction standards for subdivision, development, improvement of lands, and the construction of dwelling units thereon. So this is a powerful tool. However, last year, Mike Molina on Maui County Council wanted to amend their own 201H housing policy to increase the inclusionary affordable from 50% plus 1 to 75%. Now, this may work for a tax credit rental community, but not for a for sale project. It would be infeasible. It would not be financeable. City and County of Honolulu, they have their own policy that only recognizes affordable up to 120% of the area median income. So the reason I bring this up is 201H, which is such a powerful tool created by the legislature for the development and advocating the development of affordable rentals and for sale housing, has been misinterpreted by the counties. And this powerful tool is in jeopardy of preventing us from developing more housing, both affordable rental as well as for sale housing. And I bring this to your attention because we took a case all the way up to the Supreme Court, so that Lahaina Kahoma Village, we completed it in March of 2021. Same day we had our Supreme Court oral arguments due to a lawsuit that we prevailed in circuit court that was appealed in the ICA court that took 5 years to render a decision by the ICA. It was the Protect and Preserve Kahoma Ahupua'a Association versus the Maui Planning Commission and Stanford Car Development. Well, the Supreme Court ruled that the Hawaii Coastal Zone Management Act, Chapter 205A, HRS, is not a law relating to development and improvement of land for the purposes of exemptions under Section 201H-38. This was the Supreme Court's interpretation. It was also I will say this, unequivocally, policy of the legislature that stated the purpose of section 201H-38, that a qualifying affordable housing project be exempt from all laws, rules, and regulations that impact development in any way, shape, or form, including the Hawaii Coastal Zoning Management Act. So there is a case law where the Supreme Court erred in overturning a lower court, circuit court's decision on a contested SMA hearing. So I share that with you because since 1935, they have recognized that government regulations has added to the cost of housing. And here we are 87 years later with the same problem. And with the last 4 consecutive years of the out-migration of our local people due to the fact of giving up any hope of affording a home or the high cost of living here, as well as the household expense, have decided to move elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Stanford. Thanks for the historical perspective.
Yeah.
We needed that. Yeah, we appreciate you being here, really. Thanks. Next up, we have Christine Kemp, President and CEO of the Avalon Group. Christine, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Lynn. And Stanford, thank you for sharing that history, because even I learned something new. It's been going on, I thought, for 30 something years since I've been in the business, but it's gone on much longer. I come to you from perspective of banking as well as development. You know, I'm a developer, but I've been sitting on bank boards for the last 15 years. So it all comes down to this. We know there's a need, right? Who wouldn't build to a pent-up demand? So what's the problem here? The problem is what Soon had very eloquently said. Most people can't afford more than $700 per month in rent. Why aren't you building it? And why aren't subsidized housing by government subsidies being able to rent for $700 a month? And it all comes down to cost. Not only cost, but how we finance it. Unless we taxpayers want to pay taxes to build every home, we're not going to be able to solve this problem. And so we have to look at what is adding to that cost. And I think about what Stanford just said. How much did it cost to go all the way to the Supreme Court for a project that had funding, had the land, had the proper zoning, and had the 201H blessing from the Planning Commission? How much money has been spent just to get the right to deliver affordable housing? And we in Hawaii, especially, and as a developer, I've experienced this in many of the counties. We don't want to offend anyone. In fact, I'm shocked that they went to the Supreme Court, because most of the developers will just stop because it costs too much to fight that effort. And if you do, you have to add it back to the cost of housing. So I want to use an example of a project that went through the whole process, 2 Supreme Court challenges, and that's Koa Ridge. Ho'opili went through the same thing, right? But Koa Ridge, because it's right now coming up for sale, and the homes are being sold. The single-family homes are $700,000 to $1.2 million, and there's a waiting list. In fact, it's by lottery, and the multifamily homes, you know, $500,000 to $700,000 waiting list. For every home, there's at least 10 to 20 people waiting to buy with cash. And you're wondering, what is happening here? And the reason why it's happening here is because that Koa Ridge home, had that been delivered when it was supposed to be, I used to work for Castle and Cook back in 1990 to 95. Koa Ridge was on the books, and it was supposed to be delivered within 10 years. Instead, it was delivered when? 2 years ago. And they're still under construction. Just think of what that happens. The developer owned the land. They started the planning process in the 90s, only to be stopped after they got an approval to go through the Supreme Court challenges. And those challenges are brought by people like you and I, you know, people who are community organizers who are trying to protect the environment, with the quality of living, traffic, drainage. Oh my goodness, you know, adding all that traffic on the roadway that we're already driving every day. But it all adds to the cost. It all adds to the risk. And when you add risk people need to be paid for that risk. Why? If you're waiting 20 years before your first dollar is returned to you, how would you evaluate that risk? So the developer's perspective is always, we need to develop housing. People like Stanford Carr, who's of local roots, have been developing affordable housing for most of his entire career, knows this, and he wants to be able to deliver it. Why can't he? Why does he need 140% of AMI instead of delivering for sale homes for 80% of AMI, average median income? It's the cost. It's the risk of every one of you who are here who may have submitted testimony in favor or requirements on the developer. We need affordable housing, bam! Okay, that developer is going to pay for and subsidize for all of us that need housing. How greedy of them. And so I'm not here to judge. I know everybody, I have my neighbors too, and I live in the community as well. So of course I'm concerned about our traffic, safe water, drinking water. Who's going to have my water versus someone else coming in with another 100 units in my neighborhood? So it is very, very difficult. So you're here. I see dozens of you on this call, and you're all influencers, right? You're either policymakers or you're there organizing the community. You have to say yes. You have to say yes to housing. And you can say, well, it's only for those subsidized housing. It's only for those housing that can be $700 a month or less. But then how many can be really built? Who will fund it? Will we want to tax everyone here that now that everybody leaves Hawaii because they're taxed to death? Or do you want it where the public, meaning the private markets, can actually pay for it with their money at risk and make it viable for the community? That is what I hope for. So I see Peter Savio, who's done that. He's taken no subsidy. He's been taking opportunities where there are properties that he gives ownership by providing homes at a very low pricing. He even lent people money for their down payments to his bankruptcy, for that matter. And yet he's here trying to do it again. So we're not the bad guys here. What we are here is to try to solve problems. And we put our own dollars at stake. We sign our mortgages. We hope that we will be able to deliver homes at the prices the masses of the community, right, that all of you can afford. That is the only way that it can work. But it can't work if everyone in the community feels that it's the developer's responsibility to deliver education, meaning, the facility fees of $9,000, I think it got down to $7,000 a unit. If it's the developer's job to create all the mitigation for traffic problems that we have, it is the developer's job to make sure that the drainage problems that we've had or sewer power problems we've had need to be fixed. This is all of our problems, our community. And so the solutions to us is really comes down to one thing. So when I was on the Federal Home Loan Bank Board, and I served on it for 4 years, I flew to Iowa twice every other month. So, and my goal was not because I'm a banker, but because I wanted to find opportunities where homes can be built and can be financed properly. And what are the solutions? It's nationwide. We can say Hawaii is so, we're an island state, and that we need to preserve, and the desire to preserve our neighborhood in an island state is what's causing our cost of living to go up so high. But we're not the only ones. People who live in South Dakota, they have homeless now. And they're all fighting for the same affordable housing tax credit dollars. So what I'd like us, those of us in this call or in this room, what I'd like us to look at is how can we make housing built faster? Not just rental housing, because I don't know about you, but I know majority of the people who went to college, I asked them, how did your parents pay for it? My mom mortgaged their home so they can send the kids to college. My grandma, she did reverse mortgage so I could go to grad school. Owning a home is not a bad thing. And for developers to build develop housing without subsidies, but with help to expedite, to deliver homes faster, to lessen the layers and layers of approval. We can do this. We can provide for sale housing, because for rental housing, there's a lot of help. They're not building them fast enough, but there's help out there, right? There's funding available for rental housing. But for sale housing, where the middle class can have stability into the future, I believe we need a lot of help. And whenever Stanley Chang says, hey, we need to go to the Singapore model, and we got 1,000 homes along the TOD and all that, I also think it's crazy, because we're not in Singapore, right? We have to go through our processes, but we have to think like that. Thank you, Stanley, for thinking like that. We cannot do the same thing for 86 years and think that we can solve a problem in the same way we've been doing it. We have to look at how many layers of approvals are there. Can the state, I know Nadine Nakamura, she's been at it for so long. I just really commend you for all your work that you've done. Can the state come up with solutions to pick on the low-hanging fruits to address those solutions, but also at the high level, at the umbrella level? Can we control all the requirements of not in my backyard at the county level? That's when we are going to solve our problems. And I'd like us to focus not just on the rental housing, but for sale housing. I'd like us middle class, low end, high end, middle end, all of the housing to be built. Because the more housing we build at one time, it flushes the market. Believe it or not, it hurts the developers like myself, because we have too many coming on at the same time, but it helps us as a community to have more homes available. So with that thought, I'm not coming up with any solutions, but all I'm asking is asking for help. When a project comes up, say yes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christine. We hope we can say yes, right? More people to say yes. All right, thank you for being with us. With closing remarks, now we have Representative Nadine Nakamura, Chair of the Hawaii State House of Representatives Committee on Housing. Rep. Nakamura, you can close us out. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to recognize all of our speakers. I'd like to send out a special thank you to Senator Chang and his staff, Lynn, Alex, Chelsea, and Ian, for helping to organize today's event, Housing Day 2022. And I want to just say, Jill Wright has done, continues to do amazing work in our community. She talked about the second highest per capita, Hawaii being of having the highest homeless population, and that there's 6,500 on any given night who are without a home. So thank you, Jill, for just clarifying that we need all kinds of housing to be built: new housing, rehabbed homes, incentives for developers, kauhales, all the above to address the problem. Tyler, who is in his board meeting, also shared the amazing opportunity we have if the legislature goes through with the $600 million that would go toward DHHL and the commitment to serve Native Hawaiian families who are, the most homeless based on, and the most living in overcrowded situations. He again talked about the need for not only single family homes, but transitional housing, rental housing, and subsistence agriculture on smaller lots. All of the above are going to be part of the solution to deal with the Native Hawaiian waiting list. But also he made the point that one infusion alone will not be enough to solve the problem. And we need to look at the long-term picture, but this is going to be a great start. Hakeem from HPHA is doing an incredible work, serving over 45,000 people in public housing with Section 8, with rent supplement programs and some new initiatives as well. he said we need a robust commitment, and I couldn't agree more that we need to do more of school street type projects on state-owned lands to reduce the cost of the housing. We need to work with landlords to improve our Section 8 program and do more of RAD where the opportunities present themselves. So I'm excited about that agenda as well. Soon Kim talked about housing being a basic right, and the need to, many families cannot afford to pay more than $700 a month. And the opportunity to do more around transit-oriented development, affordable housing at our TOD sites, especially where we have state-owned land, focused on kupuna housing and really looking at the needs of our disabled communities. Thank you for sharing that perspective. Stanford Carr gave us a history of housing policy in our state, and he has been one of the aggressive housing developers in our state, developing affordable housing and a mixture of housing, using 201H as a powerful tool, but may not be using it quite right by the counties. And we need to do a lot more work in education on that end. I know there's a lot of work going on in a consistent statewide housing policies to also make it easier for developers working on at different counties. And Christine Camp very eloquently talked about that developers cannot take on this burden on their own and expect to deliver affordable housing for all, that it must be a shared responsibility on roadways, drainage, sewers. We know that when you tell the developer you must do all of the above on your own, housing will not get built. Affordable housing will not get built. And that's why I thank you for sharing those concerns, because I believe with the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act that Congress passed last year, a $2.8 billion infusion of infrastructure funds, we must use that strategically to develop more affordable housing and housing across the continuum. So, and the focus for sale housing, because as these opportunities become available, people can move up the ladder as well. So none of this can happen unless we can reduce the costs by reducing the time that it takes to do development. And I think there are many bills in the moving through the legislature that addresses these needs. So I just want to say this has been a stimulating discussion. I thank you, all of the speakers, for sharing your mana'o with us. And we ask all of you to engage in the process. There's a range of affordable housing bills working through the Senate and working through the House. And I'm excited that there are very consequential bills that really can make a difference. So mahalo for, again, listening in and being a part of this conversation.
Mahalo, Representative. We appreciate your insights in the wrap up. That was fantastic. So I want to thank all of our presenters again for taking the time to be here today, for sharing all of your perspectives and great insights. I think that there were a lot of insightful conversation, and I know that we put this together fairly quickly. So again, thank you all for your collaboration. And everyone else who zoomed in, we appreciate you and hope that you will stay engaged. Like Rep. Nakamura said, please reach out to our offices. If you have any questions about legislation, we're here to help you engage in the process. And so for everyone, enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you again for being here. Aloha.
Thank you.